Good evening. Thank you for joining me. The MAGA movement has long attacked our veterans, desecrating their memory and their sacrifice. It does this following the lead of Donald Trump, the leader of that movement. Make no mistake, Trump is an ignorant and stupid man who's never received the blessing and gift of being able to commit yourself to a higher purpose, something greater than yourself, whether it be an ideal, a principle, a nation's future, or even his own children. But there's something much more sinister and catastrophically dangerous at work behind these attacks. And it is part of an effort to destroy the very engine of human progress that has led the rise of this nation year after year. And that is the concept of generational sacrifice. That when one generation fights on the battlefield and dies, or leads itself through the struggle of a noble human endeavor such as Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, it imposes an obligation and a promise on the next generation to carry on their work, no matter how difficult it may be. This is both something we should venerate and something we should see as a duty. It restricts our behavior because we owe so many before us from doing things that are dangerous to democracy, immoral or illegal, or just simply wrong. But it also provides the opportunity to have that gift of living for something greater and contributing to the rise of mankind to a more enlightened state. MAGA doesn't see it like that. They see it as a restriction on their desire to destroy democracy and do whatever they please in order to satisfy their cultish desires. Most recently, we saw Marjorie Taylor Greene exemplify in the most disgusting and horrendous manner possible this quest that MAGA is on. She did it by calling the veterans of every foreign war from this country murderers, killers. In so doing, she reflected not only her own majestic stupidity, ignorance, and hate, but she also pulled back the curtain to show you what monsters they truly are. In this video, I'm going to show you what she said, and we're going to compare those words to the actions of a man I came to learn about and know the last time I was in Georgia. It is a man who won the Medal of Honor at the Battle of Chosin Reservoir in Korea when it was 40 below zero, when his unit was facing 10-to-1 odds. And I want you to see through this contrast of what Marjorie Taylor Greene called him and what he truly was, how clear their mission to destroy actually is. All right, everybody. First, let's look at the famous tweet by Marjorie Taylor Greene where she called veterans of foreign wars who served in the American military murderers. And I quote, "The days of the old Republican Party that wants to fund foreign wars and, quote, murder people in foreign lands while they stab the American people in the face are over," exclamation point. And the exclamation point for emphasis was important there because the phrase, "they stabbed the American people in the face," did not seem emphasized enough by its own terms already. So I'll give her credit for that. In case there's any ambiguity about what she meant in the first sentence, the second one makes it even more clear. The American people do not want an economy built on people's blood and dead bodies in foreign countries. So you can see there, not only were American soldiers murderers when they were fighting overseas, but they were in fact doing it for a profit motive. Now, I want to compare this wild, unhinged Unabomber description of American veterans with somebody that I came across last time I was in Georgia at Kennesaw National Cemetery. This man is 20 years old when he died at the Battle of Chosin Reservoir in 40-degree below weather. And when you compare his example of how he lived with this description, you understand what I'm talking about. So when Marjorie Taylor Greene accuses every U.S. veteran of a foreign war of being a murderer who was in it just for the money, I thought we're better to test this accusation than our own home state, Georgia. Is there somebody who's a veteran of a foreign war who is in Georgia and is from Georgia? Absolutely yes. And the person we're going to look at today is somebody I remembered vividly when I visited a war cemetery in Georgia a few years ago as I was passing through meeting up with family. His name is Lee Phillips. At the age of 20, remember how young 20 is when you're old like me. At the age of 20, he won the Congressional Medal of Honor. We're going to get into his heroic actions. There's actually so many heroic things he did that day, so many Superman things he did that day. I'm going to have to like summarize and cut a bunch of stuff out because this guy is just a beast. Now, let's first talk about the conditions he was fighting under. And those conditions include, first, the terrain. It was a mountainous environment. Corporal Phillips and his men, 20,000 Marines of the 1st Marine Division, were fighting uphill. There's no vegetation that they can hide behind to either take respite from the weather or to take cover from enemy weapons. It's hard to breathe because they're way above sea level. There's rocks and cliffs, and it's so cold that everything is frozen over with ice. You can't get traction, you can't hide, and if you try to dig in the ground, well, it's frozen, so you can't even build defensive fortifications of any quality. Now, second, the disposition of forces. Again, 120,000 Chinese infantry, as you can see on the screen, were descending upon only 20,000 Marines of the 1st Infantry Division. So you've got bad terrain, you've got completely outnumbered. What's next? Well, we've talked about it some, the weather and how it impacted operations. When it is cold like this, it is so difficult to think. It is impossible to have any kind of consistency in your fine motor skills. You can look at your hand and tell it to do this, or you can try to think about a plan for a defensive operation or an offensive operation, and stuff just doesn't work. Same thing happens with the machinery, the weapons, everything else. Even the medication on that day was not functioning. For example, the medics had to take bottles of morphine and stuff them in their mouth and walk around like a chipmunk because it would freeze, literally, if they did not, if they kept it in their pocket or in their medical packet like they ordinarily would. Combine all this difficulty and imagine what you would have done and how you would have reacted as a 20-year-old. I know myself, I can't imagine I would possibly be able to function in any effective way as a fighting soldier at that age, at that time. But this is Corporal Phillips, his story. Let's talk about it. Everything facing Corporal Phillips and a squad of 13 men embedded within the larger 1st Marine Division of 20,000 men, that day was the worst it could possibly be. The worst weather, the worst terrain, and the worst disposition of forces, severely outnumbered. And yet the mission made it even worse. They were supposed to take a position that was uphill where there were multiple fortified positions for mortars, machine guns, and infantry squads. On top of that, 5 prior squads had attacked this position and had failed, presumably with severe casualties. So if you're the 6th different attack on the same position, not only is that an indication that it was effectively a suicide mission, which you must do sometimes in the military, but it also indicates the Chinese soldiers knew what they were doing, and they're going to be able, throughout each attack, to hone their tactics, to sharpen their focus, and to do things that would increase the likelihood of failure for Corporal Phillips and his squad. Well, Corporal Phillips died that day, as do most Medal of Honor winners. But he succeeded in his mission. Not only did they take the position, charging uphill, fighting nest to pit to position, and finally getting up to the top. When they did, out of 13 men, only 5 were left. They faced multiple counterattacks over and over and over and over again. Each of these was repelled by charging down the hill and fighting position to position to position. You see, by the time everything was done that day, out of 13 men, only 3 were left. The most symbolic part of Corporal Phillips' actions that day is what I call the human orangutan fighting maneuver. It's 40 below zero, and he basically rock crawled along a sheer rock face, and dangling from there was pulling out grenades, biting them out with the pins out with the teeth, and throwing them to take out a final position that they could not get fire upon in any other way. And that day, despite overwhelming odds, despite knowing certain death faced them, they fought like lions. MAGA, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Donald Trump, they hate our veterans. They hate our veterans because they set an example. They hate our veterans because they restrict the future behavior of people who are acting against democracy. Their memory, their legacy, is something we should be proud of. And I know that I am proud to carry on their work and what they fought and died for. Look at Corporal Phillips. Look at how the South Koreans have lived to his example. They've created one of the shining lights of democracy and a global powerhouse of opportunity in the South Pacific. They lived according to what he died for. They made the most of their opportunity. And we're going to make the most of his opportunity by rejecting MAGA, by helping Ukraine, and being the very best that we can be for democracy, for human rights, for freedom, and for the love of all humanity. God bless Ukraine. God bless America. Thank you so much. Love you all.